Good morning, church. How are you guys doing this morning? Are you ready to stand and worship with us? Come on, put those hands together. Don't be shy and sing out. Come on. Hey. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb, yeah, till I met you. Come on. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb, yeah, till I met you. That's right. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Come on. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Yeah. Come on. Let's sing about that mercy. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Come on. Freedom. Now your freedom is all that I know. Come on. We obey you. Yeah. Jesus, when I met you. When you called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Come on. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Yeah. Come on. Put those hands together. Let's go. We're going to declare some words this morning. We're going to throw that kite in the air. We're going to let the Spirit catch it. You guys ready to join me? I needed rescue. My sin was heavy. Chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter. I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future. My eyes are open. Just when you call my name, I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Yeah. When you called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Come on. We sing them all back, sing them all back. Sing them all back, sing them all back. Oh, we sing them all back, sing them all back. Call you maker. You give life an eternal spark. I call you healer, 'cause you mend any broken heart. I call you faithful Father, 'cause you finish everything you start. My soul was made to respond. Sing, I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed by what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back to you, yeah. Sing them all back, sing them all back. Sing them all back, sing them all back. Your love is boundless, beyond what I can dream. Your grace is patient, 'cause you're never giving up on me. I call you bondage breaker, 'cause you're handing out the prison keys. My soul was made to be free. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back, I'll sing them back to you. Sing them all back, sing them all back, sing them all back. Sing them all back, sing them all back. Sing them all back, sing them all back. You are Rock of Ages, you're the great I am. You are King forever, the beginning and the end. You are Lord and servant, you're the Son of Man. You're the Lion of Judah, you're the risen Lamb. You're the second Adam, here to lead us on. You are Yahweh's glory, now revealed in flesh and bone. You are ocean potter, you will make a way. You are death defeater, you have risen from the grave. You are full of mercy, you are rich in love. You are Jesus, Messiah, the one to come. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed with your ways. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back, I'll sing them back to you. Sing them all back, sing them all back. 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 Oh, I know you by 1,000 names. You sing. And you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back to you. Sing them back to you. For you are good. Bring life, you bring joy.
The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Sing it with me. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflowing this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here in this place. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflowing this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. Overflowing this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. Surrounded by your love, Jesus. Whoa, Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. Your kingdom come, your will be done, here as in heaven. Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. miracle can happen now. For the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Sing it. A miracle can happen now. Raise your voice. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. God, we know your Spirit is here, Lord. We know your Spirit is there, even if we're not always there to meet it. Don was talking to us earlier, talking about how not everybody comes here, feeling, 100%, even 80%. Some people got in fights before coming here. Some people are stressed and worried and just kind of tired of waiting for something. God, we've all been through it. We're all going through it. We all will go through it. We just want to be here for each other, Lord, and we want to be open to what you have for us. And we want to give our lives to you. We want to be a response to what you did for us in our lives. And we want to keep our hearts open to whatever it is. If it's virtue of yours that we need in our lives, God, we want to be open to that. We want to see that your Spirit is in this place, in these hearts. And every one of these open hands and these people that are here and spent the time to get up and come here in search of you. And we love you for that opportunity. In Jesus' holy name. And everyone said, amen, amen. All right. Hey, before you guys have a seat, maybe turn and say hello to somebody that you haven't met yet.
Awesome job. Oh, wow. Look at all the life in here. Good morning, Shoreline. This is awesome. Guys, I see you. There's lots of you. This is fantastic. If you happen to see any room in your row, if you don't mind just scooting in to make room for those people just walking in, we want to make sure that we have a seat for anybody that's walking in late. They're already late. They're already stressed. Let's make it easy on them. With that, good morning. We're going to be moving to 3 services because I know you guys are feeling the people. So the good news is that we see it too, and it's a beautiful thing. It's growth. So we want to encourage you and invite you to know that we are moving to 3 services, and you can be a part of it. And you can learn more about that out front at the Legend area, but know that we see it, we're excited, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So with that, good morning. I am Jessica Holzapfel. I am on staff here at Shoreline, and I work with our initiatives and our prayer and our care team, and it is such an honor to be here with you. I am mom to 4 children, oldest being 8, youngest being 17 months. Yeah, and here at Shoreline, we've actually had all 4 of our children dedicated here at Shoreline. And I'm talking about that because I was thinking back to our oldest, and this child dedication was coming up, and we had no idea what that meant, but we're like, we should do that. We have a kid now. Let's go get them dedicated. And so we didn't invite anybody. We didn't really know what was happening. We didn't know what we were getting into. So I want to help add some clarity to anybody else who might not know what that is, because I didn't for a long time. So child dedication, and what we do here at Shoreline for child dedication is, it's an opportunity for us as a church in our community to come alongside and pray for your child. And not only that, we are praying for you as a family. We are covering you in prayer as a family on how you're going to raise your child, and we're celebrating it because you're choosing to raise your child to know Jesus. And that is the celebration that happens in a child dedication, and it is happening next weekend on Sunday morning during both services. So if you have a child, it does not matter age, guys. Don't think it's just for babies. It is not. But know that we have a space for you, and we want you to be a part of creating space and having Jesus in their story. So if you want to head to the app and register for that, we would love for you to do so. Don't do what we did our first time. Invite your friends, invite your family. It's a big deal and it's worth celebrating. So I want to encourage you guys in that. Speaking of celebrating, who was at Night of Worship last Sunday? Y'all, it was awesome. It was so, so good. And we had awesome reason to celebrate because God is continuing to use our church to do great things, and he's not done yet. So I'm super expectant in that. And with that, we're going to turn to a time in our service where we offer, where we turn to our tithes and offering to give God our first and our best. And it's also a form of celebration to truly give to God so that he can continue to do his work, Father. So thank you so much. In a minute, we're going to show a video to show what that celebration was about last Sunday. And then the host team will be passing the buckets when that video starts. But I first want to mention irrational generosity because it is such a big part of what we do. So here at Shoreline, we believe in irrational generosity so much that if you are an adult in significant need of food, shelter, or clothing, please know that as the buckets pass, you may take that cash so that it may meet your need, because we already believe it's God's anyway. So after this video, we'll have Pastor Eric coming back up to join us. And I don't know if I did it, but good morning online, because I want to make sure I say hi to you guys. And I will see you guys a little later.
Good morning, Shoreline. This is me, Pastor Eric, with my lovely wife, Darlene.
Yep, it's so cool to be here at Nighttown. We're standing right on the stage, looking out at the auditorium. It would be like when we're all here together, we'd be looking at your faces. So this is pretty exciting to be here today.
So I'm getting a feeling of what it's going to be like to preach to you. You may not have been around, but when we closed on this building, our construction costs came in at around $525,000. And when all was said and done, we had $550,000 to complete the renovations for this facility. So by the time this February rolls around, we should have a completely done church. Because here's the cool thing. We sit back, we can look back and see how God set us up to get in this building, how we were able to raise all the money for the construction. And so, yep, we've got some more steps we're going to have to overcome. But if God did that, how much more can he do for us, for those who believe? So,
and we're going to be celebrating the fact that all the money came in and our building is being paid off. We're going to dance on a banknote.
we're really encouraged by it. We're encouraged by your generosity and your support, and especially your prayers.
I promised myself I wasn't going to cry. You're like, whatever, Eric. You cry every week because God is so good. God is so good. Welcome, AG. Those watching online, AG's your moderator. Pastor AG, he's being licensed with us as a minister, so we're really excited about that. Even though he's out in the West Coast in Oregon, he moderates here, so that's really cool. And our services, it's 2 weeks, we go to 3 services, and the times are going to change. It's going to be 8:30, 10, and 11:30, so you're going to have to pick a service. Just so stoked. So here's what we're going to do today. I want to go back into the true story that I started last week, and it's the story of probably Jesus' most famous apostle, and that's Simon Peter. And his story is actually Peter told his story. What? Goat? Is that what you're laughing at? Oh, I thought my zipper was down. You're like, Peter, probably Jesus, one of the most famous disciples, he was uneducated. And so how we get the story of Peter is through the book of Mark. Because Peter, as I told last week, was sitting, probably waiting execution. He was with Jesus for 3 years, and then he spent 30 years telling this story. And then finally, he's sitting in a jail cell in Rome, and Mark is there with him, and Mark is like, give it to me one more time. I need to record this for not just this generation, but it needs to be recorded for generations after this. And so Peter just kind of unloads to Mark, and Mark's just taking it down as fast as he can. And like I said last week, it's kind of this download where you're just throwing it out there. So if you read the book of Mark, it's kind of chaotic, it's out of order. He does parables and miracles and conversations, and a lot of what you hear is then immediately. So it's just really fast moving. But the amazing thing about Peter's story is Peter includes the most embarrassing moments of his time with Jesus. And that helps me understand that the Bible's probably pretty true, because most of the time in history, when someone records their story, they leave out the embarrassing parts. You know what I'm saying? You don't talk about your embarrassing parts. But Peter, we're going to look at one of them today, he includes the embarrassing things that he did with Jesus, which when you really think about it, when we tell our story, when you decide to become a Christ follower, nobody leaves out what happened before they met Jesus. You know, you put that in there. You say, this is the kind of person I was. In fact, you rarely ever hear somebody go, I was perfect, and then I met Jesus. I only know of two people that did that, the Apostle Paul and Andrew Womack. That's it. In the whole world, it's all like negative, this is what I was, this is what I did. So we're going to look at that story again today, but we're going to actually fast forward it to a story that is told where Peter is actually Jesus and his disciples are up north. We're going to go back to this map. Any map lovers here? So they're actually up north in this place. Oh, look, I got a pointer today. They're probably going to take it away from me by the end of the service. Up here in a place called Caesarea Philippi, okay? And this is the place where Jesus is with his disciples. And while he's there, he asks them, he's like, hey guys, what are people saying about me? And they say, oh, some say you're a prophet. Some say you're John the Baptist reincarnated. Some say you're blah, blah, blah. And then he asks them this very extraordinary question. He says, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? And Peter answers him, you're the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus does something amazing. He doesn't go, oh, stop it, Peter. That's too much. Go on. You know what he says? He goes, you're exactly right. And upon that foundation, the foundation of that statement, he says, I'm going to build and he uses this Greek word called ecclesia, and we know it as the church. He says, I'm going to build a movement. I'm going to build a gathering of people. I'm going to build this movement, okay? And it's never going to stop. Nothing's going to be able to stop it. After saying that, they journey, where'd my map go? They journey south from Caesarea Philippi. This is Capernaum, that's where Peter's from, and they journey past Galilee, and they start working their way down the Jordan River, and they're going to head over to Jerusalem, okay? So they're headed down there, and as they travel, Jesus begins to remind them once again of what to expect when they get to Jerusalem, and this is what he said. We're going to pick up the story in Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 31. Here's what he says. He then begins, so he's walking with his disciples, and not only his disciples, he's got a crowd with him because everybody's following him. He says, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. Now, here's one of Peter's embarrassing moments. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Could you imagine sitting around with James and John going, oh, Peter, remember that time you rebuked Jesus? Shut up, man. You know, Peter the rebuker, right? He says, he took him aside and began to rebuke him. But look at this. When Jesus turned and he looked, I don't understand this. He looked at the disciples, but he rebukes Peter. He says, get behind me, Satan. He said, you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And so what he's saying here is like what we talked about last week. Oh, no, see, you want a king like all the other kings, but I'm not a king like that. And I've come to establish a kingdom that's not like any other kingdom. That's why I've come. And so to emphasize the point, he begins to gather the crowd. He calls the disciples to him, and he calls the crowd to him, and he wants everyone to hear what he has to say as they're on their way to Jerusalem. And here's what he says. Verse 34, he says, called the crowd to him, along with his disciples, and he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. I mean, you could have heard, it was like a bowling alley. You could have heard a pin drop. The quietest building there is because you can hear a pin drop. No, I bet it was quiet because, see, listen, here's what he's saying. This isn't going to be fun anymore, guys. This is going to be, oh, look, we're following the Messiah, and he's cool, and we've got crowds. It's not going to be like a parade or a music festival. He says, look, from here on out, if you follow me to Jerusalem, it's going to cost you something. Now, when he uses this phrase, pick up your cross, to us, that's symbolic, right? It's us. We're like, pick up my cross. That means, it's my cross to bear. My husband burps at the table, or, we look at it as symbolic. But to these guys, this was reality. This was literal, because for them, they had seen crucifixions. They had seen people carrying their cross, because when Rome executed you, they didn't just execute you, they humiliated you. And they'd seen it, they'd smelled, they'd heard the wailing of crucifixions. Maybe they'd seen somebody or knew somebody, one of their family members had been crucified. They may have lost a loved one. And what Jesus is saying, I'm just telling you, from here on out, if you're going to follow me, if you're going to heed the call, you're probably going to suffer. It's going to cost you something to follow me. Now, disguised in this ominous threat is this cool declaration, extraordinary invitation. I got a new mic. Donnie, do you need to fix it for the, do we need to fix it? Or can we wait? Is it bothering you guys? It is to my wife. She's like, and the way you're dressed and how much you weigh bothers me as well. Just pull it back some. All right. Oh, well, you didn't have to touch back here. All right. Okay, so, but disguised in this declaration is this incredible invitation. Here's what he says in verse 35. He says, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, which that would be all of us, right? We all want to save our life. We all want to save our life. He says, but whoever wants to save their life is going to lose it. And it's his fancy way of saying, listen, everybody dies. You know what? No matter how healthy you are, that's why I don't care what I eat and drink. No matter how healthy you are, no matter how much in shape, you're going to die. No matter how hard you work to preserve yourself, everybody loses their life. But in the meantime, if you only live for yourself, you will only have yourself to show for yourself when you get to the end of your life. That's it. But here's the invitation. He says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. And in that moment, what he's doing is he's inviting us. He's inviting them. He invites you. He invites me to really what we're calling in this series, heed the call, to lose our life with purpose. So now Peter and the boys, they have a decision to make. We can stay up north, keep fishing in the Sea of Galilee, and die one day as old men, probably never recorded in history, forgotten. Or do we heed the call to live a life of purpose? And that's a good point, because you know what? Everyone ends up somewhere. Everybody ends up somewhere, right? We all do. But if you want to end up somewhere on purpose, you have to be intentional. It's the intentional people who end up somewhere on purpose. Now, so I think we have a decision to make. Will we be consumed with preserving our lives, which is always a temptation, by the way? Will we be consumed with preserving our lives, knowing in the end that you won't preserve them? Jesus said you're going to end up losing it. Or do we continue to say yes to fear? You know what happens when you say yes to fear? Fear always invites us to follow the path of self-preservation. Well, that's good, Eric. Can I tweet that? Yes, you can. Fear always invites us to follow the path of self-preservation. But Jesus knew that if you follow that path long enough, you will neither preserve your life, nor will you have anything significant to show of your life at the end. And so the question, or what he proposed to his first century followers, extends to us as well, and that is, will you follow me? Will you heed the call? One of the things that I found that helped me keep that in perspective is the question that Graham has talked about, and it's a question that I've talked about, is this question that if you ask this all the time, no matter what situation you're in or what you're facing, the question is, what does love require of me? What does love require of me? Then that helps you keep that mindset of it's not about me, it's about other people, it's about what Jesus wants to do, and it helps me to lose my life for his sake. Now, I'm sure that Peter never forgot that day. The fear, the anxiety, the confusion. I mean, I'm sure it would have been easier to stay in Galilee, but he decided to follow. And that's why his story is worth telling. That's why 2,000 years later, here we are in a former nightclub telling the story of Simon Peter because he made a choice instead of, and listen, a lot of people, when it said, hey, lay down your cross and follow me, that was a big deal. A lot of people said, that's too tough for us. In fact, there was a guy they call him a rich young ruler. He decided he couldn't heed that call when Jesus said, why don't you sell everything and follow me? It's like, that's too much. But Peter and the disciples, they decided that they were going to pick up their cross and they were going to follow him, which made it a story worth telling, which helps me. I want to talk to you about your story, and I want to give you this. It says, when my story of blank is just a story I tell, for me, when my story of being homeless for 5 months, or when my story of my dad dying last year, when my story of someone who someone I trusted did something to me, and I suffered because of it, or my story of handing this church off to the next generation, when you tell your story of your child who won't talk to you anymore, or the spouse that left you, or the diagnosis you received, or the addiction you struggled with, your infertility, or that unfortunate accident, or someone who betrayed you, when it's just a story that you tell a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when my story is just a story I tell, will it be a story that's worth telling? Or let's make sure our stories are worth telling. And so the decisions that we make during that time, during those crises, the decisions that we make every single day will determine the stories that you tell. It's going to determine the stories that I tell to my kids. It's going to determine the stories that I tell to my grandkids. It's going to determine the stories that we tell every single day. And it's easier to retreat to our fear and try to preserve our life, but fear doesn't necessarily preserve your life. In fact, retreating to your fear to preserve your life, you know what you're doing? You actually lose the opportunity to do something extraordinary and see God do something extraordinary in your life. So, Peter and the boys, they head south. They're going down to Jerusalem. Actually, the scriptures say up to Jerusalem, even though it's down. If we go back to our map here, even though it's south, it's down. But when you're going down the Jordan River and you get down here to Jericho, it's actually below sea level. So they always talk, and Jerusalem is in the mountains. So they always talk about, when you read the scriptures, going up to Jerusalem. So they start to go up to Jerusalem. And in Mark chapter 9, it says this: they left that place and passed through Galilee. They were on their way to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way. And I got to stop there right now because, listen, this is kind of interesting, because here is Jesus talking about death and doom and gloom and suffering and the cross and crucifixion and all this. And then Jesus is leading the way. It's like he's out front and they're having to keep up with him. And I think about this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know you're on your way to an appointment where you're gonna die, and yet he is headed straight there, man. And he, once again, during this time, he warns the disciples again about what they're about to face. It says they were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished because they're like, look at him. He knows what's coming up. Maybe they didn't know because they were kind of stupid. We're going to see it in a minute. And the disciples were astonished while those who followed were afraid. So maybe they heard it. It says, again, he took the 12 aside and told them that was going to happen to him. He says, we're going up to Jerusalem. So this is the second time. And the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and hand him over to the Gentiles, which is the Romans, right? They'll hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Then it looks like he changes gears. It says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come up to him. So I want you to get that picture, all right? So they're on their way to Jerusalem. Jesus is out ahead, okay? Remember, this is immediately after this graphic explanation of what's going to happen when they get to Jerusalem, right? And so James and John run ahead to talk to Jesus, kind of like out of earshot of the disciples and the other disciples and the rest of the guys, right? And so this is what they say to him, verse 35. He says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Yeah, that's really cool it's really bad. That's a bummer about the flogging and the spitting and the mocking and the crucifixion. But can you do us a favor? I think Jesus is so patient. Listen to his reply. He says, what do you want me to do for you? Just like, not like, I would have gone, are you idiots? Did you not hear what I just said, right? Now, this is a really important question. He says, what do you want me to do for you, right? What do you want me to do for you? We're going to come back to this. So I want you to remember this question, okay? And here's what they said. Verse 37. Let one of us sit at your right hand and the other at your left in your glory. So Jesus, all that spitting and mocking, yeah, that's horrible. Can we sit at your right hand and your left when you come to your glory? Not now, wait till after the bad stuff goes. Then can we sit at your right hand and your left hand? And he says, boys, you don't even know what you're asking. You're asking this, but you don't know what that means. And a few verses later, it says this. It says, when the other disciples, heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. They were like, you are so insensitive. He just talked about, no, that's not why they were upset. You know why they're upset? The same reason your kid's upset. No, I wanted to sit at the right hand. No, I called shotgun. No, that is so, they were, and so what happens is an argument breaks out about who's the greatest. They're like, no, I deserve that. I'm the greatest. I keep the treasure. No, I'm the greatest. And so suddenly they're having this argument about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of God. And Jesus has already covered this like 2 or 3 times. And once again, he has to cover it. He says, verse 42, so Jesus called them together. And he said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, they lord it over them. And their high officials exercise authority over them. In other words, you know how this works, right, guys? You know that in the Gentile world, the Roman world, the pagan world, what happens is when someone gets, power and authority, they rule mercilessly over everyone else. In fact, I kind of came up with a paraphrase, okay? And here's the paraphrase. I got 2 of them. Verse 42, this is Eric's version of the Bible. You know that those in positions of authority leverage their authority for their own benefit, right? Except for the ones in the United States government. But everybody else does that, right? Here's the government one. We'll be shut down next week. Here's another one. You know how those with resources and influence leverage their resources and influence to gain more resources and influence for themselves. In other words, you know how the world works, guys. The powerful people have all the money, they have all the power, and you know what? When they have it, they just try to get more. Got it, right? And the disciples are like, yeah, we get it. That's why we want to sit at your right hand and your left hand. When you're up there, we want to be at the top of the pyramid. There's you, and there's me and my brother, right? And he looks at them, and he looks at us this morning. And he says 4 words that stop me in my tracks. And these 4 words, like when I listen to them and I apply them in my life, it makes me a better leader. But when I don't, I just become self-absorbed. Okay. So they say, hey, let us. He says, and he says, all those with resources and power, they influence. They just try to build it up so they have more. And look at the first 4 words of the next verse. Not so with you. But not so with you. He says, listen, anyone who wants to be great in the kingdom, right? He says, you want to follow me, you got to pick up your cross. Because you know how the world works. The world works, you get power, you get authority, and you use it to get more and more and more, and you use it over everybody else. He goes, but not so with you. In fact, if you want to be a leader or GOAT, greatest of all time, if you want to be a leader in my kingdom, because remember, I didn't come to establish that kind of kingdom because I'm a different kind of king. He says, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. You want to be at the top of the pyramid, James and John? Then you're going to have to serve your brothers. In fact, you're going to have to serve everyone. For, look at this, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So, any questions, guys? James, John, Peter, you good? All right, let's go to Jerusalem. Now, this was so confusing to them. This talk, give up your life, a ransom, take up your cross. I'm sure at this point, Peter was like, can we still go back to Galilee? But then Peter tells us that they finally make their way to Jericho, and something extraordinary happens in Jericho. Okay, so they get down. So we saw Jericho on the map. They get down to Jericho. It says they came to Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. So they've gone through Jericho, and now they're on their way to Jerusalem. So they're leaving Jericho. And remember, now Peter is telling the story to Mark. Probably at the end of his life, he's going to be executed any day. So Mark is just writing all this down. And Peter probably says, and we couldn't believe it, because Jesus was so anxious. Like he told us what was going to happen, and he knew, and he was just like dead serious. We're going to Jerusalem. But then this blind man starts calling in his name. He says, together with a large crowd, we're leaving the city. A blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And so many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. They're like, come on, don't bother him. Shut up, because he's a rabbi and he's important. But that wasn't kind of rabbi Jesus was. He shouted all the more, son of David, have mercy on me. And then something amazing happens. Remember, Peter's telling the story. But look what happens. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and look what it says. Jesus stopped. And he actually stopped to illustrate his message. He actually stopped to illustrate this upside-down kingdom that he was introducing. He actually stopped to introduce what kind of kingdom this was. And it was a kingdom that a kingdom where people took their power and their resources, and instead of using it for themselves, they leveraged it for people who had no power and less resources. Think about this. Jesus is on his way to his most important appointment. I'll tell you, this is convicting to me. Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty busy. You guys, anybody busy here? I'm busy. Aren't you busy? Here's the point of this story. Sometimes following Jesus requires stopping. You know, a church that I used to work at, Pastor Dave's here, I want to honor this guy. I worked with this guy for 17 years from the East Coast. Pastor Dan was here a few weeks ago. He was one of the pastors. And one of the things that was so frustrating to me was remember this, Dave? They had the pastor on call, and you'd be the pastor on call for the day. And I remember one day I'm preparing for youth ministry. We got youth service that night. And the phone, called from the front desk, Pastor Eric, there's somebody here off the street that needs to see a pastor, and you're the pastor on call. And I was like, I have a message to write. I can't just stop and meet with somebody who just comes off the street. And I just remember clear as a bell, Jesus going, isn't that what ministry is about? I was on my way to heal someone, and a woman grabbed my garment with an issue of blood, and I stopped to minister to her. See, Jesus always stopped no matter where he was going. And sometimes if you decide to follow Jesus, it requires stopping. So anyway, Mark tells us Jesus stopped and said, call him. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. I could see the crowd going, shut up, don't bother the master. Oh, bring him here. Hey, he wants to see you. And then it doesn't say, but I'm like, how did blind Bartimaeus get there? Like, did they sit and laugh when he ran into a telephone pole, because he's on his way to Jesus? I think Jesus would have come to him, right? But then Jesus makes this statement, this extraordinary statement. Again, it's kind of like Peter's story. It's a statement that if you were writing this and it wasn't true, you wouldn't really put it in the word. You wouldn't put it coming out of Jesus' mouth unless it was true, okay? You wouldn't make it up. Think about it. It's one of the, because there's a lot of things that Jesus said that confused the disciples. We see that. We see it in this story, right? He's talking about going to the cross and all that, and here he is. They're wanting to be the greatest in the kingdom and be on his, sit at his right and left. So he says, in fact, there's some things that confuse me. But if you didn't know any better and you read this next statement, it would seem like Jesus is actually teasing him or making fun of him. But I believe that Jesus asked blind Bartimaeus this question for the sake of the people around him, and specifically the disciples. In fact, when Jesus asked the question, I have to believe that he looked over at James and John, and here's what he said. What do you want me to do for you? The same question that they asked, right? What do you want me to do for you? And you know what he says? I want to see. I want to see. That's a good thing to ask for. God, give me vision. Could you imagine if James and John, instead of saying, hey, do us a favor, what do you want me to do for you? Let us sit at your right hand. And what if they just said, Jesus, we're not understanding what you're talking about. Can you help us see the way you see? What if they'd asked that question? Could you help us see the way you see? Because that would have probably changed everything. They would have understood what he was talking about. And I'm telling you, this is a prayer that I pray all the time, especially when I don't know what to do, especially when I'm dealing with difficult situations, maybe a disagreement with people or whatever. I say, God, Lord, help me to see as you see. Lord, help me to see me the way you see me. Help me to see my family the way you see my family. Help me to see the church, your church. Help me to see this community. Because if I can see as God sees, then I'm going to be more inclined to do as God says. But if I continue to just see as I see, then I'm going to be less inclined to heed the call and do what God wants me to do. So here's what he says, verse 52. Go, said Jesus, your faith has healed you. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Now I want to circle back to verse 43. Not so with you. See, here's the question that I want to wrap up this morning is, what would it look like in your world? What would it look like in your family? What would it look like in your job, in your corporation, in your community, if you were to become a not so with you leader? And let me just say this, when you choose to follow Jesus, when you choose to heed the call, I love it in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, they go, I think it was Andrew, and said, hey, when he meets him on the Sea of Galilee, hey, where are you staying? John, in the book of John, where are you staying? Follow me, come see. Peter, hey, follow me. That was Jesus' command. But ultimately, when you decide to follow Jesus, Jesus will always lead you in this direction, to this question. Jesus will always lead you whether you want to be a not so with you leader. And those of us who have any kind of leverage, those of us who have any kind of power, any kind of resources, or any kind of leadership, he is going to lead us to this. Leverage your power and resources for the benefit of those with less power and fewer resources. And this is the direction. So I don't want to, because you'll have a guy like me stand on a stage like this and go, come to Jesus. That's all it takes is one step, man. Just one step and just follow him. It's so easy. We go, oh, good, I'll follow him. But ultimately, if you decide to follow him, you're going to be faced with this. And many people turn around, like the rich young ruler. When Jesus said to him, sell all you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. And it says it was too tough, and he turned and walked away. But if you're here this morning, or you're watching online, and you're like, I've been duped. Eric just said, follow me, and now he's telling me I got to lay down my cross. Jesus will always lead you in this direction to love others the way he loved you. That was the great commandment, the final commandment that he gave us. Peter finds himself in the back of a crowd and watches this play out in real time as his rabbi gives his life as a ransom for many. Now, it wasn't until after the resurrection that Peter kind of put this all together and finally understood this, that Jesus was a different kind of king, and he was ushering in a different kind of kingdom. And it was an upside-down kingdom that just didn't make sense or didn't look like the world looked. And this whole idea of being a not-so-with-you leader, it begins with a question that I want to give to you. And I think we're going to put this question up. And I would encourage you, here's what I encourage you to do. If you want to be a not-so-with-you leader, pull out your phone, take a picture of the screen, and I would put it on your what do you call this, cover thing? Put it on your wallpaper. So when someone goes, when you're in some kind of situation, some kind of crisis, and you go, well, I don't know, I really have time. Graham texted me, said my fly's down. Such a serious moment, Eric. How could you do that? I don't really have time, that you'd see this question pop up. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I recommend that anybody who has any kind of influence, any kind of leader position, maybe you lead a family, maybe you're a boss, maybe you're a leader in school, I recommend I recommend that you ask this question and put it in front of your face, because it will help you become a not-so-with-you leader. Now, here's the deal. I am accustomed to people asking me, Pastor, what can I do to help? What can I do? They asked me when I walked in this morning, Pastor Eric, is there anything you need? What can I do to help? But if I'm going to be a leader like Jesus, I've got to be the one to ask this question. Because it's the question that Jesus asked, and he gave his life as a ransom for many. So what can I do to help? How can I loan you my resources? How can I put my influence? How can I put my weight? How can I leverage that to help you in your needs? Because when you leverage your power, when you leverage your resources for the benefit of those with less power and fewer resources, you are actually heeding the call of your Savior who leveraged his power and his resources for us. And here's how I know that. Go back to the verse. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And when you lead from this posture, you are actually heeding the call. You are a not so with you leader. Now, you don't have to. You can turn around. Say, I don't want to follow anymore. It's too hard. But in the end, Jesus says you're not going to be able to preserve your life, and you're going to have nothing to show for your life. But if you will heed the call, he says you will gain real life. Let's pray. Father, sometimes it's tough to follow you, but it's so worth it. The purpose, the significant things that we can accomplish, the things that are bigger than we could accomplish by ourselves, that when we get in part of the body of Christ and are part of the church and we heed the call, Lord, when we take that, when we're able to leverage our resources and leverage our power for those who maybe don't have the power or for those who are less fortunate, those who are marginalized, those who are on the outside, Lord, that's what you did. And God, we want to heed the call and we want to follow you this morning. So we thank you for your word. We thank you for that invitation. I mean, sometimes I feel like Peter, maybe I'd rather be fishing. But in the end, it's not worth it. Lord, so we thank you for calling us. We thank you for calling us up higher to be a part of something that's greater than ourselves. In Jesus' name. Now, we are in part 3 of our vision series for the year, Heed the Call. And today, what we're doing is there's my stools. Today, we are introducing our initiatives for the season. Now, if you're not familiar with our initiatives, every year we do initiatives twice a year. In the fall, we introduce initiatives, and usually they're local initiatives. We partner with people doing things locally, children and things like that. This last year, our initiative in the fall was to pay off the building, which we did, right? So, the one that we do this time of year is for our international initiatives, where we partner, and we actually ask them this question, our international partners, what can we do to help you? And then they will send us. Now, we kind of slowed down during COVID because a lot of our international partners had to come home to the United States during COVID, but now they're getting back into going. I mean, things are going internationally. And so we've got some initiatives, and we're asking the question, what can we do to help? So before I bring Jessica up here to talk about our initiatives, let me say this. When we give towards these initiatives, what we are doing is we are leveraging our power and our resources for those who have less power and fewer resources. Now, you can do that anywhere, okay? You can do it anywhere. And I want you to hear my heart on this. This is what I want for you. I want you to be able to take that step and say, I'm going to heed the call, and I'm going to leverage my power and resources for those who have less power and fewer resources. And you go, but if you think Shoreline has an agenda or whatever, then do it somewhere else. I don't care. I just want it for you, because I know that when you live that kind of life and you heed the call, you are going to experience fulfillment. You're going to experience something that you can't otherwise. Like Jesus said, you try to preserve yourself, you're going to lose it. But those who give up their life for the sake of the gospel will truly find real life. But here's the other thing. By pooling our resources together, what we do is now we leverage. In other words, say we're a part of a group of churches that give $10,000 a year to missions. But if we're a part of 100 churches, that's, what is that? $100,000. That's a lot of money, a lot more. And that's what happens. It's like going to the gym, right? You can go work out yourself, but there's something that happens when you get in a class and you got other people there and you're motivated. That's what that's how this works. When you decide, you know what, I'm going to leverage the resources that I have, and some of it's few and some of it's a bunch, and we're going to pull it together, and we're going to accomplish something that's bigger than ourselves and accomplish something that we couldn't accomplish on our own. Now, before I introduce Jessica, let me just say this one more thing. You will notice that a focus of this year's initiatives, there's only 3, is that it's on the next generation. And if you've been in this church, we've been talking about passing the baton to the next generation, how important the next generation is. You know, we're right now, we're developing leadership classes for your elementary students because that's how important the next generation is. So in our initiatives, we're gonna be focused on the next generation internationally with the partners that we've been working with. So Jessica, everybody welcome Jessica back up.
Hey guys.
And she's gonna, you've been given a card.
Yes, so I know it's kind of confusing because hosting came by, they handed you a bucket, but it's not for offering. We actually have something for you in it. So if you did not get a card and you want a card to kind of read along with us, just wave your hand in the air and a member of our host team will get one to you, and we'll have some out and available in the lobby as well after service. So with that, yes, we are doing Next Gen in a global focus, guys, and I could spend the whole hour talking about it because it's something that is
Can I have one of those cards? Anybody got the next one?
passionate, or I'm so passionate about. I can give you this one.
No, I got it. You need that one.
Okay. So there's going to be some pictures flashing up behind me, and they're just going to kind of be reeling through. But these are the 3 main focuses and organizations that we're going to be partnering with in this season. And these are not new organizations to Shoreline. We have had years and years of relationship with these organizations. So we have MAP 1040 and Indo Youth Center and Amani Malele. So I'll start with MAP 1040 to give you an overall view. Luke Walters is...
He's going to be speaking here July 2nd.
There you go. July 2nd, he'll be here, but he is one of the most joy-filled men I've ever met in my life. It's like Santa in real life. And you meet him, and he has this beautiful laugh and this joy for Jesus, but he goes internationally. And this year, they're really focusing in on Sri Lanka. And they've been praying, and they work with indigenous people on the ground to get out and get the gospel to these really hidden and off the beaten path places. We've raised money for motorbikes in the past. It's that same organization. And this year, their goal is to help impact 300 villages. And when you impact a village, that's legacy. Yeah. That's a big deal. So what you'll see on the card is you'll have kind of a quick note about what it is and then how you can be a part of it. It's an invitation into opportunity to truly be a part of something bigger at a global impact.
So $100 reaches one village.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's
you can
a great
bring the gospel to one village abroad in Sri Lanka for $100. And so the next is the Indo Youth Center. And so you see a map and you kind of see... we can't really give too much detail about this organization because we want to protect them because it is not safe to reveal where exactly they're working and what exactly they're doing. They've been in Shoreline before. They've visited. They're longtime friends of the house, and they're doing awesome work with the Next Gen over in Indonesia. So you'll see a couple things pop up, like the map, and that's just kind of a glance of Indonesia because I can't really share
where they are.
Too many pictures and details, but I can always have a conversation. So if you want to ever talk with me, we can talk about it. But I will say that they're having great impact with the Next Gen. They create irresistible environments, including a cafe, much like our cafe, where you want the Next Gen to hang out and they want to be there. So they're looking to make a few upgrades to their cafe space to make it that much more inviting for the Next Gen to be there. They want to, similarly here, the kids are all hanging out at certain places because it's a good, fun, encouraging, inviting space. And that's what they want to do there. So they gave us a little wish list of items. And the cost for that new equipment is $5,000 to upgrade their systems. And then last but definitely not least is Amani Malele. I almost said it like you said it.
Milli Vanilli,
yes.
That's what I call him.
He says that all the time, and now it's in my head.
Because when you try to spell Amani Malele, spell check just...
always butchers
you put Milli
it.
Vanilli in there, and it's fine.
Always butchers it. So Amani Malele is a group that we've been working with since 2013 in Uganda, Africa, and they are going to be coming here in April,
yes.
which is amazing. It's an organization that's near and dear to our personal family's hearts as well as the church. We've done so much with them, including there we go.
School.
So we built that school, y'all.
Woo,
see that
Shoreline
school right
built
there?
That school, y'all.
We did that, and that was when a team of us went in 2019 to celebrate the school happening, and Pastor Donnie brought, of course, some volleyball net and balls, and we just literally had a party all day and celebrated what God did there, which is such a great thing that we get to be a part of. So I want to encourage you because they're coming in April. It's April 14th, I believe. It's a Friday, and they're going to be having a concert here, but they're going to be in our area for 2 weeks, guys. It's so cool what we get to be a part of. So through that, that school was built in a village called Lugazi. And in Lugazi, we're really honing in to try and impact that community specifically and those kids.
It's a great deal here. $30
Great deal.
buys 100 meals. I can't even get a meal for $30 in Destin.
Yes.
And 375 feeds every person at that school for one day.
Yes, and just to give you a heads up, they get 2 meals a day at the center when they're in school, and then they have about 800. Sorry, I shouldn't say numbers. They have about 800 students at that specific center, and only about 80 have sponsorship.
Yep.
So we'll get to hear more about that when they're in town on what you can be a part of. But we're really honing in on that specific center because we've built a school there. We already have a relationship in that center, and it's really cool what we get to be a part of and how much our what is small to us can really impact at a global scale. It's such a big deal.
And just so you know, we're not taking an offering this morning. This is our initiatives, just like our initiative last year. At the end of the year, we went from September all the way to December. You have time for this. So you take this card home, you pray, you talk, and if you want to give to it, give to it. 100% of this goes to these initiatives. There's nothing coming to Shoreline Church. It's all going to feed people. It's going to take the gospel out to Sri Lanka. It's going to build that youth center that's reaching young people, students over in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim population country in the world. So encourage you with that. And anything else?
Well, with that, on the back side of this card is how you can give.
Oh, that's important. Huh?
Yes, it's important. It's the same way you can give like this all year long to our missions initiatives. You go to our standard giving page, and if you click down on the drop down, it'll show you missions and initiatives. And so whatever goes in there goes always straight out to our mission field, whether it be because we continually support these organizations in a different capacity all year long. This is their above and beyond. This is their additional ask of how we can really, truly help their mission. So there are ways to give it up there. This is a card that you can scan at your convenience. And like Eric said, we're not doing an offering right now. We truly want this to be an invitation into opportunity, not a sad puppy dog commercial where we tug at your heartstrings.
What's that girl's name that we could get to
I
sing
didn't want
for
to
us?
say it because we're online. And so...
What is it? Sarah McLaughlin.
So I just want to let you know that it's really cool to be a part of, to know that you can have global impact with your yes now.
Even the dogs in the commercial are like, wow, Sarah, that's a bit much, don't you think? I'm just a dog.
So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for being with us this morning, and I want to let you know that prayer is available after service. We have, actually, Pastor Dave is going to be joining us in the prayer space today. So please know that prayer is always an option because we want to partner with you in all things, in the celebrations and all things.
And let me say thank you for being a net dropper. If you weren't here last week that we're talking about we're dropping our nets. You've done such a great job with this, and I just know the future of this church is in great hands.
Thanks.
God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.
Good job.